Stories of an Aircraft Builder.
All historical research is of course based on documents and original artifacts that can be measured and which structure and production methods can be examined. All this material then allows the knowledge to be applied in new ways, and applying it has always been my interest. I've never been one of those who thought they had to collect knowledge in order to write about it. Far too often, unworldly thoughts come into play that are then simply accepted as truth by the readers. No, it has to be practicable with the means of the time and the same material, otherwise it remains one-sided and possibly flawed. How do you do something like this as a young person who decides to recreate a World War I triplane at the age of 12? At first, of course, it wasn't even important because I wasn't aware of all this. But after the childhood dream slowly turned into something that threatens to take real shape, I soon realized that I couldn't just parrot what others told me to do, in the sense of following what they wrote. Anyone who approaches something with open eyes realizes that the most obvious point that can cast doubt on what was written about is old photographs. Photos show how things were done and what they looked like. Reports and descriptions don't do this so well, and if drawings are then inattentively created from them, then these drawings become something that obviously does not correspond to the original. In my experience, most people simply don't care. They are not interested, but I am. In early episodes, I reported how the statement by the Fokker historian at the time, Mr. Peter Alting, had particularly spurred my young mind. But how is that supposed to work? Others study to be an archivist or librarian in order to bring some order to their collections of documents. In my case, I knew nothing about this and had to come up with my own system to not only file and retrieve documents, but also to evaluate them fundamentally. Not every document and every source can have the same value, and to help me with this I created the first rough classification system for my constantly growing archive. In my case, the task was double exciting, as it was not just a matter of classifying any documents that had been collected and were available, but also of compiling them in the first place. I wasn't taking over an existing archive, but saw it as part of my job to compile one from the outset. This compilation was a task in itself, especially for a youngster like me. When I started doing this, the internet didn't yet exist, and it was not possible to send messages around the world in a matter of seconds, or even to send whole piles of documents via WeTransfer and such back then. Everything was still done by mail, post. Documents arrived piece by piece at intervals of weeks, months, or even years. Some of the most interesting documents came to me completely unsolicited. For example, one evening I received a call from South Africa. An elderly gentleman had recently died there, who must have been an employee of Fokker in his younger years. He took some documents with him when he emigrated to South Africa after the war, which he kept like a treasure for decades. His family wrote to Leonard Opdyke, who referred them to me, and so I was asked if I had any use for these things. They were too good to be thrown away. I said yes, of course, and shortly afterwards received an envelope with construction drawings of some Fokker airplanes and some original construction drawings of the buildings at the Fokker plant. But not just copy. They were original drawings glued on canvas, and the drawings themselves were colored with crayons and colored inks, and the front had even red additions. Wonderful Category A material. So, the archive grew rather slowly, but every document left its mark, which I immediately traced and picked up and tried to continue searching for more sources, and so I was able to amass a sizable collection of both photographs and documents. And each of these documents was incorporated into my archive and categorized into photographs or documents according to my classification system, as well as into different degrees of credibility. The basic structure at the time looked much like this. Topic was aircraft construction, followed by a company, followed by aircraft type, and then split in documents and photographs. And each document was then assigned a corresponding degree of credibility. There were several levels of these. Credibility level A, for instance, was contemporary documents, such as documents in written form and photographs taken at the time. Credibility grade B, documents that were produced according to such category A documents. This also includes eyewitness accounts and documents produced at the time based on Class A documents. This in turn also includes reports on captured German aircraft. Small errors always occur in such things. Credibility Credibility grade C, documents prepared on the basis of the study of categories A and B for outsiders. This would of course also include my own production documents. Credibility grade D, documents that were produced according to undetermined sources. And then there was the degree of credibility level E, documents that are obviously humbug. I kept them in my archive also, but labeled them as such, of course. Photographs were kept by me on index cards containing the most important data about the image in question. If negatives or glass plates were available, they were also filed accordingly. I collected documents in small folders. This included everything that was tangible: letters, orders of construction, drawings, regulations, sketches, you name it, it was in those folders. And all of this was studied and rummaged through every day until all ambiguities on the perspective topic was resolved. Only then, when I thought that everything was clear, did I start making drawings myself, so that the knowledge I had acquired in this way could also be put into practice. The system was of course immature and prone to errors. It often happened that drawings were made and then new materials came along that showed the details better or differently. Then changes had to be made. The process went on for years and still continues today, by the way. That's how I ran my archive and expanded it until 2009, when something happened that changed the expansion of the archive somewhat and helped to perfect it. But I think we'll save that for a later episode when we approach that year in my stories. Everything always is only as good as its operator, and I, too, am only human. This also applies to the evaluation of documents that are compiled into an archive in such a project. For the outsiders, let me briefly allude to a few small things to give you an idea of what is involved here. It doesn't matter which document you take, whether it's a letter, a drawing, or a photograph. They always show only a section and only this one part. Whether or not all other parts of the same design were made in the same way is by no means confirmed by that. You always have to weigh things up, and in the end you have to make a decision that is either wrong or right. Good if it is right. If it is wrong, it depends on when the error is discovered, which can be quickly or only after years. It is also possible that a detail is only found as an original factory drawing and is then implemented in this way, and that other copy of the same factory drawing with changes of a factory nature appears later, or a photo pops up that proves wrong. Or you have photographs of a component that is shown differently on a factory drawing. What is then recorded in the drawing can be both incorrect or correct, or it may be correct for the later production or incorrect for the earlier one, or vice versa, depending on the case. My drawings, based on my research and the archive material I have collected, were intended from the outset as historical studies. Thus, for the above reason, they should not and cannot represent a closed, conclusive set of drawings for the triplane, as the sources always show different things. One part may be drawn as the sources suggest for an early aircraft in series production, while another part shows a component from late production. And make no mistakes, there are enormous differences that you can't just see from the outside. it goes into detail. And this in turn creates a further difficulty for anyone who deals with this. The evaluation of which parts belongs to which period and what the same part looked like in another phase of series production is the responsibility of each user of these documents. An adventure in itself is therefore not only the compilation and organization of an archive in an immense collection of now several 100,000 documents, but also the evaluation limited by one's own intellect and the representation of the results to the outside world eventually. In recent years, in collaboration with my good friend Jerry Moss and his takeover of the archive management, the archive has grown to over 800,000 documents, mainly relating to aviation in Germany up to 1920, but of course also including other areas. This has necessitated a complete reorganization of the archive and the filing system. But as I said, you will find out about this part of the story later. The stories of an aircraft builder can tell you some other things until then.